What is good, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for. I'm going to talk about SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, Nvda, and many tickers out there. Talk about how the market may be impacted by Jerome Powell, and what the news is saying about Tesla, as we have some new updates that are very important. Before I break anything down with all this information, talk about how Tesla may move going forward, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And finally, don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $100 cash reward. The offer ends in just 3 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, so Tesla was up 3.8% for the day, closing above this 250 resistance, looking quite nice so far from a technical standpoint. SPY is also green, up over 1%. The QQQ is up over 1.7%, and the market's holding up nicely. But the thing you have to remember is Jerome Powell is going to be speaking again tomorrow, and what he says will affect how the market moves. So you have to be ready for that. I'm going to break that down in just a couple of minutes before I break down the charts. I'm also going to talk about this formation on Tesla and something else that happened that's very huge. But first, let's talk about this. We had technology services and also electronic technology leading the way. We had like Apple, Nvda, the Metas and the Microsofts out there continuing to help the market hold up. And tech was still continuing to perform quite well. Tech helped the market pump a lot more, and we saw retail trade and many other sectors doing all right. We did see the financial sector kind of flat alongside healthcare being a little bit on the red side. But besides that, most of the sectors were pretty decent, holding up still, as the market is still very resilient. But now when we look at what these articles are saying, like over here on Yahoo Finance, you could see they're still very excited about how tech is rebounding, how tech is still holding up. That's despite what Powell may cause for tomorrow, because typically when Powell's about to start speaking, or as we approach Powell, the market may sell off at the very end or even slow down. That's not what happened this time around. We saw the market just continue to short squeeze. The market is still holding up nicely. Now, when the data came out, we saw very, very interesting developments in the housing market. We saw new homes built at a faster rate. And we saw a tighter resale supply alongside more Americans being very confident about the overall economy. So, right now, the American consumer confidence report was looking very strong. Americans are still confident, and things are still looking pretty decent for the economy. That's not exactly what the Fed wants, so we have to be careful with Powell for tomorrow. But now, when it comes to earnings, let me just remind you guys that we have Jeffries coming out very soon after the market closes. We also have General Mills coming out, Micron and BlackBerry for tomorrow. And then for Thursday, we have Nike and Rite Aid. The biggest one's going to be Nike for the week. And for Friday, there's not much else coming out. But just watch Nike, in my opinion. I think that's going to be one of the biggest earnings for Thursday and for the entire week. And besides that, we have not much else coming on from the earnings side. Now, for the data for today, just to remind you guys, the data is looking pretty strong for the economy. The housing prices are still going up. They're still quite decent. We also saw the consumer confidence report very strong. Americans still have a lot of confidence in the economy, despite some recessionary fears. It's still stronger than expected, and the new home sales are up alongside the other housing pricing index reports. So things are still looking pretty good. Manufacturing index wasn't as bad as expected, and the data is looking pretty strong. As a result of this, Jerome Powell will be speaking tomorrow at about 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow when the market opens is going to be important, and he may say some important things about the data. He may say the economy is too strong. He may say some hawkish things. So as soon as the market opens, Powell is going to be opening his mouth. He's going to be speaking at CNBC at an economic forum alongside other economists and big leaders. So this is going to be very important. What he says will shift the market, so just be ready for it. If he says anything too hawkish, the market may slow down a bit. But remember, he's going to be done speaking after maybe like an hour to an hour and a half or something like that. That's typically how long it takes. On an extreme case, it's going to take like 2 hours, but I don't think it's going to take that long, probably like 1.5 hours at the most. And then once Powell is out of there, the market should improve, in my opinion. But then you have to remember that at night, if you're on the Pacific coast at 11:30 p.m. or 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is going to be Thursday morning, Powell is going to be giving another speech. And when this guy talks, the market's going to move even more. So we have him speaking 2 times this week: Wednesday when the market opens, and then Thursday very early in the morning on the East Coast. Then he could affect how the market moves for Thursday when all the GDP numbers and things come out. So it's going to be very interesting for the next couple of days. So just you have to be ready for all of this volatility that may be incited by Powell. Looking at some headlines, we can see right here it's saying that Powell promised a housing market reset, but is it actually happening? So far, we're not really seeing it. So it's just worth noting, if Powell is hawkish, the market could slow down a bit. Just be prepared for that just in case. If he doesn't say much, the market could just hold up and continue pumping later on. I will discuss that in just a couple of minutes. Now let's talk about some news affecting Tesla and then the data before we talk about the charts. So the SAE is creating a standardized version of Tesla's EV charging plug. This is once again some good news that came out. This in turn is going to provide certainty, expanded choice, reliability for manufacturers, and also it's going to increase access to charging for consumers. This is some good news that came out as Tesla is becoming the default charging connector for many of these different EV companies, and many of them are continuing to join the race to be a part of Tesla's charging network. On top of that, ChargePoint and Volvo have jumped in. They're joining the Tesla supercharger bandwagon. If you want to use that word or not, it doesn't really matter. But once again, this is some very, very good news. We had Ford joining in, GM joined in, Rivian joined in, and now Volvo is following the trend. And more of these car companies are going to be joining in my opinion. Hyundai announced that they are very interested in joining in as well. And we could see many other big names. Imagine if Toyota makes an announcement like this, like they're willing to be, at least considering it or something like that. That could be bullish as well if something like that happens. It's very likely that more and more companies will join in, and this is very good news for Tesla. And now, on top of this, there is a report that came out that said that Tesla got very angry by leaked Valencia project for Spain. This is once again I don't know too much about this because there's limited data so far, and even the report says the same thing about this. But basically, around a particular area, the head of the Valencia government may have reported that Tesla's angry about how negotiations were leaked. Not a guarantee. I don't really know all of the data just yet. We're still waiting for more information to come out, but this is making a lot of headlines. Tesla was not happy about this. Lots of what they deemed as confidential information was leaked about the diversity of the region, how Tesla's making its plans to enter there, the resources Tesla could be extracting, the more affordable labor and just things like that. I don't know if Tesla is like going to give us a report about this or not. I just don't really know enough details. And that's exactly what this article says. But if that's the case, I mean, Tesla may have a very good reason behind it, why they weren't very happy about this, why they got angry. If not, we just don't know enough about it. But I just want to call this out. The reason I'm talking about this is because this is making so many headlines right now. It's just worth noting that there's just not enough information about Tesla's side, so we can't make any judgments. But I just want to note that Tesla does not seem very happy about it nonetheless, though. They don't seem very happy about this report getting leaked. And we will find out more later on, in my opinion, if Tesla does respond. Now we have some updated data from Tesla's new inventory listings. We can see there was a drop in almost everything over the last couple of days as we're approaching the end of the quarter. And looking at the numbers for Tesla are looking very promising. They should get us somewhere around 440,000 plus deliveries, in my opinion, based off my numbers. I made a video about this recently, but I will give you guys an update video maybe as soon as Saturday, because the data comes out on Sunday for deliveries for Q2. And we're approaching the end, so we saw this big drop, and overall it's looking very good, especially for the Model 3. The Model 3 and the Model X saw big drops, and we saw slight drops for the Model Y and the Model S listings, and it's continuing to look very good as these inventory levels are a lot lower than before. This gives me more hope that we could get a decent report, especially if you look at it on an international lens. I think Tesla should be meeting expectations or beating them and breaking a new record for sure for all-time quarterly deliveries, in my opinion. So it's looking quite good, looking quite promising. We will find out over the next couple of trading days. But for now, when you look at Tesla, we have average volume at 163 million, very, very close to average at 165 million. So not bad for Tesla. And on top of this, the short volume is still starting to go up just a little bit, still a little bit high. There's still shorting going on for Tesla. The price-price ratio dropped a bit, but now it should be bouncing as Tesla's continuing to hold up. And finally, we have something new that came out. When Goldman Sachs, DZ Bank and all these other banks and institutions are saying that Tesla's a hold, sell your Tesla shares, secure profits. One bank, Deutsche Bank, came out and said buy Tesla. They're reiterating just buy Tesla. They're saying buy into Tesla. It's looking very, very good. They're very excited. So I really love their honesty, and I think that's very awesome for them to be reporting this. So that's some good news for Tesla that just came out. On top of this, Tesla tends to be green about 48.73% of the time on Wednesdays. It tends to be weaker on Thursdays historically, but not a guarantee this time around. But with Powell speaking, that's going to be an external factor. So you have to watch out for that. June tends to be a strong month as a report every day. The second hour and the fourth hour tend to be very strong for Tesla, especially the fourth hour. You could see today during that time, Tesla was pumping quite a bit. And finally, we saw another increase in the short interest. We saw 53 plus million Tesla shares shorted as of recent. We may see another development over the next couple of days. But anyways, now I want to break down the charts and talk about something very important. First off, let's talk about what's going on with the more like longer term trend on Tesla. Looking at Tesla, okay, this thing is at $250 a share. It's still holding up very nicely. We had a very, very healthy amount of pumping that was going on. However, if you redraw the trend line, you can see Tesla still technically didn't really break out of this falling wedge-like pattern. We don't technically have an official break just yet, but we held above 250, which is a good sign. Now, the reason why I'm still going to be concerned, or at least very cautious in a way, is because we have Jerome Powell speaking tomorrow. When the guy talks, we might see Tesla cool off if he's a little bit more hawkish. I just don't know for sure what's going to happen in the morning, but the odds do favor a slight slowdown as Powell has been very hawkish as of recent, and the data that came out has suggested a relatively strong economy. Powell said that if the economy is too strong, the Fed is going to give us two more rate hikes. That's his words, not mine. So just be careful. If he says something like that, the market may cool off a little bit, but even if Tesla cools off, okay, you're going to be watching this like 247 as the main support. That's where the neckline was for the head and shoulders. If it comes down, completely fine. Nothing to worry about because I believe Tesla will most likely recover as we approach Friday. I think Tesla's going to get a very, very nice pump. I think Tesla has the potential to break out of this wedge for sure in a very strong manner and break 250 later on during the week, regardless of what happens tomorrow with Powell. I still think Tesla has a lot of potential to push up, especially by Friday, right before deliveries come out for Sunday of the week. Now, I think Tesla's going to break well above 250 by the time we get to Friday during the open market hours, and this thing's going to be pumping into the 260s, maybe even 270s by then. So I'm still quite confident it's going to bounce nicely, so I'm not too worried about this. But for now, I just want to show you guys the bigger trends. Last but not least, for SPY, before I start talking about the more micro trends, on SPY, we had this very clean looking bullish falling wedge breakout on SPY, and we have another gap all the way up here at 439. Now, with Powell speaking, it could cool off a bit and get very close to this 50 EMA around the 435s. It could cool off a little bit, completely fine, nothing to worry about. But then later on, when we have tech sectors, we have Apple breaking new highs, we have Tesla potentially pumping, we might see all of those things help the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the QQQ, and all these different indices. All of these different stocks start pumping a lot more. And we might see this thing start pumping and try to fill this gap very soon over the next couple of trading days. It may not happen tomorrow. I'm not too sure about tomorrow because it depends on Jerome Powell, what he causes in the morning. But when he's done speaking, the market may start pumping again. And if we get a break above this like 438 resistance, this thing is going to fill the gap up here and get very close to 440. Could still happen. Still looking quite good. And now I'm going to break down, excuse me, sorry guys. Now I'm going to break down the more like micro levels if you are more interested in like scalping and what else you should be watching for. So with Jerome Powell speaking for Tesla, if Tesla cools off a bit, okay, watch 247.5 as support to 247. That's where the neckline was. If that breaks, watch the 245 zone, 244.5 to 245, the entire zone right there. If that breaks, watch 242.5 and potentially 240 as support. But if we like come down to like 247.5 and we try to bounce intraday, the resistance to watch for, if we break and hold above like 250, the next resistance is going to be 252.5, the mid 250s, 254 to 255, 257.5 to potentially 260. So those are support and resistance levels to watch for. Now, what do I think is going to happen though? I'm thinking the market may cool off because of Powell. I don't really know for sure, but I'm just thinking that because Powell has been very hawkish as of recently, and he may say something the market doesn't like. We may see Tesla come down to 247.5 and maybe one of these other supports, but I don't see Tesla crashing. Okay, I don't see it crashing very low. I think it may cool off a little bit. And then when Powell is done speaking, when the guy is out of there, the market's going to likely start to just consolidate a bit and start pumping a little bit. I think things could improve big time. We may see a repeat of this tomorrow because Powell is going to be speaking again Thursday early in the morning. So we could see like a repeat of this trend, and then we may get a very nice pump later on. I do believe Tesla may cool off a bit, but if it starts pumping very hard, it could happen. I'm expecting it to happen by Friday, but it could happen even sooner. If it breaks this 250 area, it's going to start pumping to these higher levels. So we're just going to be watching it on a level-to-level basis and be careful because I can't really predict everything. It depends on what Powell says. My best estimate would be maybe like a cool off when Powell speaks, then a nice bounce, and then possibly a nice pump either by today, if not sometime tomorrow, approaching Friday for Tesla. And this thing is going to likely pump all the way back to the 260s to 270s. In my opinion, by Friday close, I think it's going to happen. That's just my view, but hopefully you guys watch these levels and remain very careful when Powell speaks. With Powell speaking, we may see SPY retest once again this 435 area. If that breaks, the 1 hour 50 EMA is at about 433.97. That's going to be the next support alongside 433 flat and then 432. This may cool off to like 435, maybe a little lower. Who knows? It really depends on what Powell says, the extremity of his words. It may cool off the market, and then it may get a very nice intraday bounce when the guy is out of there. When Powell is done speaking, the market should bounce and do a lot better. And the market may start pumping again. And we could see a retest of this 436 area. If it breaks above 436.64 to 436.8, that entire zone, it's going to pump above 438. If it gets above 438, we're going to fill the gap at 439. And then the 440 is going to be the next major resistance. So I know it's kind of like on a $1 basis over and over again at these higher levels, but that is what the chart is telling us. And I'm simply reading the trends so far. We are getting good buyers, so the market still has a lot of potential. Let me also now talk about AMD before I talk about the QQQ and a couple of others. If AMD breaks below the 50 EMA, below this 110 area, we're going to be watching this 108 support as the next major level. If this thing does hold above these high levels on the 4-hour time frame, so I'm going to switch to the 4-hour, you're going to be watching a break above, once again, this 111 area. And then the next important level is going to be like 115. I could see it do that, but it has to break this first. May cool off with Powell speaking, then get an intraday bounce. And then we're going to be watching resistance after that. We'll see what happens tomorrow depending on Powell. For the QQQ, just like SPY, it's going to have a very similar formation, may cool off, retest the next support around this 362 and then 361.77 zone. Then it may get a bounce after Powell is done speaking and try to push it back to 363. Support levels to watch for are going to be 362 to 361.77, 360, then 359, then 357.5. It could bounce at one of these higher levels, though. I'm just noting what the support levels are just to be safe. It could come down to like the very low 360s, then try to bounce, but maybe like 362, 361.77. And then once it bounces, once this thing pumps, you're going to be watching this 363 zone as resistance, then watch 364.5 as the next resistance. It could retest that. If it breaks above this after the bounce comes, right after Powell's done speaking, we get a bounce, right? If it breaks above 364.5, watch 366, 368, then potentially 369 to 370 as the next resistance zones. I think, once again, we're going to slow down with Powell, maybe retest the lower 360s like 361.77 to 362, which is where our 50 EMA is, then bounce and start pumping. Maybe we try to break this high and get a flat stay. Who knows what's going to happen? Depends on Powell, of course. What he says could affect the market big time for the remainder of the day too. But when he's done speaking, the market should improve if there is any downside. So I'm going to be watching support and resistance just to be safe. On the NASDAQ, this thing got a very nice bounce, came very close to the 50, didn't quite reach that. So I think I was looking at, I believe, the 1-hour time frame, and we saw this thing, once again, approach this previous resistance right over here, and it got this very, very nice break above it. And you could be arguing that there's this like cup and handle like formation on the NASDAQ. It hasn't fully filled the gap yet either, so it may cool off. Maybe it retests the 50 EMA and then bounces. That all depends on Powell. It's going to likely follow or trade very similar to the QQQ. For SPX, we have this gap up here at 4,400, so don't forget about that. SPX may come down to retest the 50 at 33.62 or so. It may cool off with Powell speaking, then get a very nice bounce and start pumping later on over the next couple of trading days. Fill this gap back to the 4,400s. I think the odds favor that. For the VIX, for instance, this thing hasn't fully filled its gap. So it may bounce, get a small bounce, because of how the market's performing right now, and then it could end up cooling off to finish filling this gap and continue dropping later on. So maybe the small bounces because the market cools off a little bit, just a tiny bit, maybe like $1 or so on SPY, like very, very small pullback because of Powell. Then this thing starts collapsing. The VIX is dropping because of the market pumping when Powell is done or later on during the week. So the VIX could have more downside later on. So that's what I'm seeing for that. For the SQQQ, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders forming. I think I saw it somewhere. I think right, where was it? I saw it on one of these charts. I think the 4-hour time frame showed it somewhere here. You could argue that not the inverse head and shoulders. Sorry, guys. A head and shoulders is forming. I do apologize for that. A head and shoulders is potentially forming on the SQQQ. I said that wrong. We have like a left shoulder here, a head, and then maybe like a right shoulder that could be forming. So maybe this thing bounces a little bit, right? Because of the fact that the market could cool off with Powell just a little bit. This bounces, then this forms the right shoulder, right? We have a left shoulder, the head, the right shoulder could be forming. Then it could start downtrending, and that may happen because over time the market's going to gain strength once Powell is out of there. Maybe the GDP numbers are decent, and maybe we get a good PCE by Friday, and the market loves it, and the market improves, dragging the SQQQ down. So that's just one of my predictions. I just wanted to note that the dollar is down, which is completely normal for the market. That's pretty decent and a good sign for the markets. Coinbase is looking very good. If it cools off, watch 66 as support. Below that comes 64, 62, then 60, then 59.22, and 58.25. If it breaks up, you're going to be watching 70 as resistance, 71.8 as the next one. Then comes 75 after that. So 71.8 to like 72 would be the next one, if anything. It may cool off with Powell to retest 66. Maybe it drops a little lower or not. Get a nice bounce, and overall it's looking bullish. Then it may push back to 70 and eventually make its way up to 71.8. That is my target. For Alibaba, this thing right over here has this nice gap below, and there's a potential inverse head and shoulders structure that is developing. Right over here, there's a possibility that this may end up playing out. That means it may get a cool off with Powell. Maybe it cools off and fills this gap down here on this or it comes back to where this gap was. Sorry about that, guys, to like 85. And then it tries to bounce. It could get a cool off first and then try to bounce. That's what I'm eyeing right now in Alibaba, but we will see support and resistance. Watch resistance around this 88 zone. That's where it has some resistance. If it breaks that, it could get closer to 90. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching support around this 86.75 area. If that breaks, it's going to come all the way down to about 85.5 and potentially 85. So maybe a cool off first and a bounce is what I'm eyeing most likely. For Aapl, okay, Aapl broke another new high, is looking quite strong. Maybe it cools off and retests the next support at 187.5. If that fails us, watch 186.5, 186, then 185 flat. If it cools off a little bit, it could get a very nice bounce. Then you're going to be watching resistance at 188.5. And if it breaks above that, watch 190 as resistance. So what do I think Apple's going to do? Okay, it may cool off a little bit and retest 187.5. If that fails us, watch 186.5. One of these may be the bottom. For tomorrow, maybe, I mean, I don't know for sure. It depends on Powell, but I'm leaning more in that direction. Then we could get an intraday bounce when Powell is out of there. The market may start to improve, and then it's going to be treating these previous support zones as resistances. So watch them all very carefully. I just listed all of them. For Nvda, okay, this thing may also cool off a little bit. It could be forming like a cup and handle like formation. There's just some balance up here at this like 425 almost area, around that area. Maybe it cools off with Powell and then it starts pumping. If it does do that, watch support around 416, 414, the 410 area, 405, then 400, all as supports. Then we have like 395 afterwards. I think 400 is going to hold for the time being, and we're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. Maybe a slight cool off to about this like 416 area, then a bounce. And if you get the bounce, watch this thing fly to about 421, then this imbalance area around 425, 428, 430, and then 433 to 435. Those are some areas to watch for on Nvidia. I'm eyeing basically a cool off, then potential bounce later on intraday. Google's looking a little bit weak relative to the market. It's actually below the 200, still not holding up quite nicely. If it cools off more, watch support at this 117 area. We mentioned this yesterday. 117 is below 119. And if that fails us, watch 115 potentially, or even lower than that. It is still looking kind of weak, but for it to turn bullish, it has to break and hold above the 200 EMA. If it does that, watch 119.29. If it breaks that, watch 120, then a push up to 122.03. And after that comes this like 123.79 area. So I'm right now for Google, I mean, it's not looking horrible, but it is below the 200, so it's looking a little bit weak. So be very careful with that. With Powell speaking, it may slow down, but then be careful. If it does try to bounce, it's still not looking that great. So I'm just going to be careful with it. Amazon, I told you, we may retest the 50 EMA, okay, on the 4-hour time frame. If it broke below this, that would be bearish. If it broke above it, that would be a good sign. It so far broke above it, it bounced off of it, or came very close to it and bounced. Now it's looking pretty decent. So for Amazon, if it cools off at Powell, it could retest 128, then get an intraday bounce and retest the current 129 area. If it breaks above that, watch this 130.7 area around there, 131.5, then it comes 132.5 after that. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching this support at the 50 EMA as the major level at 127.12. If that breaks, it's going to come all the way down, in my opinion, to about the 125 area, then 123.85. I'm thinking it maybe cools off a little bit with Powell speaking, then it tries to bounce intraday, and I'm still leaning in that direction. Last but not least for Meta, it's still in a nice uptrend. It actually bounced off the 50 EMA. If I zoom out on the 4-hour time frame, look at how it's holding above this yellow line. This is the 50 EMA. It just keeps on holding above it. And even yesterday, the same thing happened. It touched it, came down, and it ended up just, we saw a liquidity grab right here. And this thing went right back up. So for Meta, it may cool off, retest 285.5. If that fails, let's watch 282.5, potentially 280 as support. These are some support zones to look out for. It may cool off a little bit. I don't know how low it's going to go depending on Powell. Then if it gets a bounce, you're going to be watching all these as resistances. Previous support becomes resistance basically. Then watch 287.5 and then 290 as major resistance. If it breaks above 290, that's a very bullish signal. If it fails to do so, for now, it's going to remain a little low. If it breaks 290, we're going to be watching this thing get closer to 300 in my opinion. But if it rejects of 290 again, watch every single level I just mentioned as support. So once again, support is going to be, it's currently at 287 at the time I'm recording this. 287.5 is resistance as of right now. If it breaks down, don't forget 285, 282, 280 comes after that. Then we have 277, 276, 275, and then 272. Watch all of those as support zones just to be safe. Powell may cause a slight pullback, then a very nice bounce, and it's going to be testing these levels. All right. So, anyways, that's what I have for this video. Let me just note that for Tesla, yes, things could slow down a bit with Powell speaking. You have to be prepared for that and watch support and resistance. But I believe Tesla's going to bounce later on anyways. So even if Powell causes the pullback, that's okay with me. It's a buying opportunity. Tesla's going to get a very nice bounce and start rocketing as we approach, in my opinion, Friday, right? By Friday, Tesla should get a very nice bounce. Once we get there, we should see this thing start to push up as we approach deliveries. And I'm still very confident in that claim. All right. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you guys in the next video during the pre-markets tomorrow. Get ready for Jerome Powell. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright. And peace